if the night that defined a generation wasn't played in June under the blinding lights of the NBA Finals, but on a cold Tuesday in December, buried in the middle of the regular season, a night when the past, present, and future of basketball shared the same floor, colliding in a way that would echo for decades. Michael Jordan, the undisputed king of the sport, stood at the height of his powers. 4 championships, 4 MVPs, a global icon whose very presence turned games into theater. To challenge him was to challenge an empire. But that night, 2 new names entered his kingdom. Shaquille O'Neal, the most unstoppable force the league had seen in a generation, newly crowned as the centerpiece of the Los Angeles Lakers, and an 18-year-old rookie named Kobe Bryant, who studied Jordan like scripture and wasn't afraid to test himself against the man he idolized. It wasn't supposed to be a battle for the throne. It was supposed to be another stop on the Bulls' march through history. But from the opening tip, it became something more, a clash of eras. The future stormed into Chicago wearing purple and gold, and the crowd inside the United Center realized they weren't just watching a basketball game. They were witnessing a story unfold, a story of dominance versus ambition, power versus mastery, youth versus experience, and above all, a reminder that before you could dream of being the next king, you had to survive the fire of the one who already wore the crown. December 17, 1996, Bulls versus Lakers, Shaq, Kobe, and Michael Jordan, proving once again that the throne wasn't up for grabs. By the end of 1996, Michael Jordan wasn't just the face of basketball. He was the face of sports, period. He had returned from retirement the year before, erased any doubts about whether he could still dominate, and then led the Chicago Bulls to the single greatest regular season in NBA history. 72 wins, just 10 losses. A number so staggering it looked more like a typo than a record. Jordan had reasserted himself as the game's absolute master. 4 championships, 4 MVPs, 10 scoring titles. And beyond the numbers, there was something more. He wasn't simply winning games. He was rewriting how we thought the game could be played. The fadeaway jumper, the mid-air improvisation, the relentless hunger, every night was a masterclass. But the NBA has never stood still. For every king, there's always a challenger waiting in the shadows. And in 1996, the challengers weren't just shadows anymore. They wore purple and gold. The Los Angeles Lakers had just pulled off one of the biggest off-seasons in basketball history. They signed Shaquille O'Neal, fresh from Orlando, in a deal that shook the league. 7 years, $120 million. The kind of money that screamed, "We're building the future around this man." Shaq was unlike anything the NBA had ever seen. 7 feet tall, 325 pounds, unstoppable in the paint, yet somehow nimble enough to run the floor like a wing. He wasn't just a player, he was a spectacle. And then came the rookie. With the 13th pick in the draft, the Charlotte Hornets selected a skinny high school kid from Pennsylvania, Kobe Bryant. Within minutes, he was traded to the Lakers. At just 18 years old, Kobe wasn't old enough to buy a beer, but he was about to share the court with legends. His secret weapon? He'd studied Jordan obsessively, down to the footwork, the mannerisms, the competitive fire. If Shaq was the muscle, Kobe was the mirror, a reflection of Jordan's game, only younger, bolder, and impatient to take his place. Together, Shaq and Kobe represented the storm on the horizon. They weren't polished, not yet, but anyone paying attention could feel it. The Lakers weren't just collecting talent. They were building a dynasty, one that would dominate the next decade. But here's the thing, dynasties aren't built overnight. Before you can claim the crown, you have to go through the man who already owns it. And in December of 1996, Michael Jordan wasn't just defending his throne. He was sending a message to Kobe, to Shaq, and to the entire league. And that message would be delivered in one unforgettable night at the United Center. December in Chicago is brutal. The wind slices through the city like knives, and inside the United Center that night, the atmosphere was just as sharp. Fans had packed the arena expecting another routine Bulls victory. After all, this was the team that looked unstoppable. A dynasty in the making, guided by Phil Jackson's triangle offense, fueled by Jordan's obsession with winning. But even the most perfect machines have weak spots. And on this night, one of those spots was glaring. Luke Longley, the Bulls' 7-foot Australian center, was out with an injury. Longley wasn't flashy, but he was reliable. He knew how to set screens, how to clog the paint, how to lean his size against giants like Shaq. Without him, Chicago's interior looked fragile. That meant Jordan and his Bulls had to improvise. Instead of one solid big body to guard the rim, they'd try to defend Shaq by committee. Robert Parrish, the 43-year-old legend from the Celtics dynasty, was called into duty. Bill Wennington, another veteran, added minutes, and Dennis Rodman, the ultimate wild card, was tasked with using his energy, hustle, and relentless grit to try to keep Shaq in check. It wasn't ideal. In fact, it was dangerous. Meanwhile, the Lakers were buzzing. Their record, 18 wins, 8 losses, wasn't earth-shattering, but it told a story of a team learning to gel. Shaq was already proving he was worth every penny of that massive contract, averaging nearly 27 points and 12 rebounds a game. And Kobe, even off the bench, was making noise. Just days before, he'd scored 30 points against Dallas, a reminder that this teenager wasn't just hype. He was for real. The media had already started circling this matchup. Could the young Lakers actually push the mighty Bulls? Could Shaq's raw dominance expose Chicago's lack of size inside? And what about Kobe? Would Phil Jackson give him a chance to test himself against Jordan? The United Center crowd could sense it too. This wasn't going to be a routine win. It had the feel of something bigger, a symbolic moment, a clash of generations. Fans didn't just come to see Jordan score. They came to see if the future of the NBA could step into his world and make him sweat. As tip-off approached, you could almost feel the electricity. The Bulls, at 21-3, were the juggernaut. The Lakers, young and unpolished, were the ambitious challengers. Missing Longley, Chicago had no answer for Shaq's size except heart, hustle, and a little bit of Jordan magic. And as the ball went up, it became clear almost immediately that this game wasn't going to be easy for the King. From the opening minutes, the Lakers made their strategy crystal clear: feed Shaq. And with Chicago missing their anchor in the paint, it worked to perfection. Every time down the floor, Shaq planted himself on the block like a mountain, demanding the ball. Parrish, Wennington, even Rodman, none of them could budge him. When they tried to push him off the spot, he simply leaned back, caught the entry pass, and powered straight to the rim. Layups turned into dunks, double teams turned into fouls, and within minutes, the Bulls looked rattled. The crowd inside the United Center went quiet. This wasn't supposed to happen. The defending champions weren't used to looking helpless, yet here was Shaquille O'Neal, bullying them like they were kids in a driveway pickup game. And Shaq wasn't just scoring, he was demoralizing. Every slam came with authority. Every rebound looked effortless. His presence warped the entire floor. When Chicago tried to collapse on him, shooters found space on the perimeter. When they stayed home, Shaq punished them one-on-one. It was dominance in its purest form. By the end of the first quarter, the Lakers led 36-22, a 14-point cushion against the greatest team of all time. Shaq had already stamped his mark all over the game, and Chicago's defense looked like it had no answers. Phil Jackson tried different looks. Rodman fronted Shaq. Double teams came earlier. Wennington threw his body around. Nothing mattered. Shaq split traps, powered through fouls, and kept piling up buckets. It felt like the Bulls were trying to plug a dam with duct tape, while the water kept gushing through. And if Shaq's dominance wasn't enough, the psychological effect was even worse. The Lakers weren't playing timid. They weren't in awe of Jordan or of the United Center's championship aura. They came in swinging, with swagger. Every shot dunk was a statement. This is our time coming. The Bulls, meanwhile, were on their heels. Even Jordan, calm as ever, looked like he was studying, calculating, searching for the crack in LA's armor. But as the first quarter ended, one thing was undeniable. Shaquille O'Neal owned the paint, owned the scoreboard, and for the moment, owned the night. The King was in danger. The future wasn't just arriving, it was kicking down the door. But what nobody realized yet was that Michael Jordan had been here before. He'd faced giants, rivals, challengers of every kind. And And if Shaq's sheer force was the first test of the night, Jordan had a very different kind of answer waiting. There are certain basketball moments that feel bigger than the box score. This was one of them. Midway through the game, a skinny 18-year-old rookie checked in for Los Angeles. His name was Kobe Bryant. He had grown up admiring Michael Jordan, watching his every move on VHS tapes, rewinding fadeaways until he could mimic them himself. And now, on this night, he wasn't watching from a living room in Philadelphia. He was standing across from his hero, ready to test himself. The timing was almost cinematic. Kobe entered just as Jordan returned to the floor. For the first time, the two shared the court. The crowd buzzed, not because they expected Kobe to dominate, but because they sensed they were witnessing a glimpse of something much bigger, the present and the future colliding in real time. Kobe wasted no time. First touch of the ball, he rose up from the wing and drilled a three. No hesitation, no nerves, just pure confidence. It was a bold message. I'm not afraid. Jordan saw it, and he smiled. He'd seen this fire before, in himself, a decade earlier. But smiles in Jordan's world weren't compliments. They were warnings. On the very next possession, he called for the ball, sized Kobe up, and drove hard to the rim. A quick shimmy, a burst of speed, and then a thunderous dunk that shook the United Center. The building erupted. Message returned. Welcome to the league, kid. From then on, the two were locked in a mini duel. Kobe, full of energy, attacked with quick drives, pull-ups, and no-look passes. He wasn't polished, but he was fearless. Jordan, in turn, used his veteran craft, fadeaways from the mid-post, spins into soft jumpers, contests on every shot Kobe dared to take. The rookie wanted to prove he belonged. The legend wanted to remind him there were levels to this game. Even though Kobe's stat line that night wasn't eye-popping, the symbolism was everything. Fans weren't just watching Jordan dominate. They were watching the torch start to flicker, even if Jordan wasn't ready to pass it. Kobe walked away with lessons he'd later call priceless. And Jordan walked away, knowing the kid across from him wasn't just another opponent. He was the next great rival in waiting. It wasn't yet Kobe's league, but in that December clash, he announced himself to it. And while the duel between Jordan and Kobe lit up the arena, the real storm still belonged to Shaq. Because as the game pushed forward, Oneil kept smashing Chicago's defense. The question wasn't whether Jordan could keep Kobe in check. It was whether the Bulls could find a way to survive Shaq's destruction and claw their way back into the game. By the middle of the second quarter, the United Center had grown tense. Shaq had been eating Chicago alive, and the Lakers' lead stretched to more than 20 points. The champions weren't just behind. They looked overwhelmed. Fans who had come expecting another Bulls showcase were shifting nervously in their seats. Could it really be happening? Could the mighty Bulls fall to this young Lakers team? But if there's one thing Jordan had mastered over the years, it was patience. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He observed. Every double team on Shaq. Every rotation that left a Laker defender sleeping. Every lazy closeout. Jordan was storing information, waiting for his moment. And then, slowly, he began to strike. First, a fadeaway from the baseline, smooth, effortless, the kind of shot only he could make look routine. Then a quick spin into a jumper through contact. The crowd, quiet minutes before, started to buzz. Jordan wasn't just scoring, he was reminding his teammates that this wasn't over. Scottie Pippen, ever the dependable lieutenant, picked up the signal. He began slashing to the rim, drawing fouls, and attacking with aggression. His length and versatility gave the Lakers headaches, forcing them to adjust. And with each basket Pippen made, Chicago's confidence grew. Then came Toni Kukoc, the Croatian forward with the silky jumper, left open on the perimeter. He started to hit threes. One, then another, then another. Each swish cut into the Lakers' lead, each one pulling the Bulls closer. What had been a 20-point gap was now shrinking, possession by possession. And of course, there was Dennis Rodman, the ultimate wild card. Rodman wasn't there to score. He was there to do the dirty work. He crashed the boards, threw his body around, and got into Shaq's head. At one point, he fronted Oneil so aggressively that it nearly turned into a shoving match. the United center roared in approval. That was Rodman's genius. He made the game messy, chaotic, and emotional, tilting the balance in Chicago's favor. The comeback wasn't flashy at first. It wasn't a sudden burst of 15 unanswered points. It was a slow bleed, a defensive stop here, a Jordan jumper there, a Rodman rebound, a Kukoc dagger. Bit by bit, the deficit shrank, and the Lakers' swagger started to fade. But Jordan wasn't satisfied with just chipping away. He began controlling every possession. If he wasn't scoring himself, he was drawing doubles and kicking out to teammates. He set up Kukoc with perfect spacing, dropped dimes to Pippen cutting baseline, and even baited Shaq into fouls by attacking fearlessly in the lane. The crowd could feel it too. The nervous energy from earlier was gone. Now every basket felt like destiny being restored. The Bulls weren't just fighting back, they were reminding everyone why they were champions. By halftime, the Lakers still led comfortably, but the momentum was shifting. The storm that had blown Chicago off the floor early was losing strength, and Michael Jordan, calm and methodical, was just getting warmed up. The stage was set for the second half. The Lakers had youth, power, and swagger, but the Bulls had something far more dangerous: belief, and a king who wasn't done defending his throne. By the start of the fourth quarter, the game had turned into a test of wills. The Lakers still held the lead, but the energy in the United Center was shifting. What had once been nervous silence was now a low rumble, the sound of a crowd sensing a comeback. Shaq was still punishing Chicago inside. Every time he touched the ball, it felt inevitable: a dunk, a foul, a bucket through contact. The Bulls had no physical answer for him, but what they did have was resolve, and they had Michael Jordan. Jordan began the final quarter in attack mode. He wasn't coasting on fadeaways anymore. He drove hard to the basket, absorbed contact, and earned trips to the free throw line. Each time he stepped to the stripe, the crowd rose with him. The rhythm of his routine, bounce, bounce, spin, release, was hypnotic, and every swish tightened the game. But Jordan didn't do it alone. Scottie Pippen played like a man determined to break the Lakers' spirit. He knocked down threes, attacked off the dribble, and made life miserable for Kobe on defense. Pippen's versatility was the glue Chicago needed, and his energy fed the entire roster. Then came Tony Kukoc, who had quietly been heating up all night. With Jordan drawing doubles, Kukoc found himself open again and again beyond the arc. And each time, he made the Lakers pay. His smooth left-handed stroke became the dagger that chipped away at LA's confidence. And Dennis Rodman? He was chaos personified. One moment he was snatching offensive rebounds over Shaq. The next he was diving onto the floor. The next he was jawing in Oneil's face, forcing tempers to flare. Rodman wasn't just playing basketball. He was waging psychological warfare, making the Lakers work for every inch. Still, the Lakers fought. Shaq kept dominating the paint, and Kobe showed flashes of the fearless player he would become. A slick drive here, a tough jumper there, the kind of moments that made the crowd murmur, "This kid is different." For a moment, it looked like youth and power might actually hold off experience. But then Jordan shifted gears again. He took control of every possession, dictating the tempo like a conductor leading an orchestra. He baited defenders into fouls, hit mid-range jumpers with machine-like precision, and when the defense collapsed, he found his teammates in rhythm. As the clock wound down, the comeback turned from possible to inevitable. Pippen drilled a three. Kukoc hit back-to-back jumpers. Rodman grabbed rebound after rebound, and Jordan, steady as ever, sank clutch free throws that inched the Bulls closer. With under a minute left, Kukoc rose from the wing and buried a shot that tied the game at 116. The United Center exploded. From 22 points down, the Bulls had clawed all the way back. The Lakers looked stunned. They had controlled the game for 3 quarters, but now the momentum was gone, ripped away by Chicago's relentless assault. And as the buzzer sounded to end regulation, one truth was clear. The future had fought hard, but to win, they still had to go through Michael Jordan. The game wasn't over. In fact, the real test was just beginning. Overtime would decide everything. When regulation ended at 116-116, the building shook. The Bulls had erased a 22-point deficit, and the Lakers suddenly looked like a team caught in a storm they couldn't control. For the fans, It felt like deja vu. They had seen Jordan flip games before, and now he was about to do it again. From the first possession of overtime, Jordan took command. On defense, he baited Shaq with a quick stunt, forcing a turnover that ignited the crowd. On offense, he didn't force shots. Instead, he trusted his teammates. Time and again, he found Toni Kukoc, who had turned into Chicago's unlikely closer. The Croatian forward drilled jumper after jumper, punishing the Lakers for leaving him open. Shaq still rumbled inside, throwing down dunks and trying to will his team back. But something had changed. The Bulls weren't playing from behind anymore. They were dictating the tempo. And every time Los Angeles made a push, Jordan responded with a cold, efficient answer. A pull-up mid-range, a trip to the free throw line, a perfectly timed assist. The tension boiled over when Dennis Rodman and Shaq tangled under the basket, shoving and jawing until the refs stepped in. The Lakers were rattled, the Bulls were composed, and Jordan was calm, serious, laser-focused, the exact look fans recognized from every championship run. As the final minutes ticked away, Jordan stepped to the line for two crucial free throws. Swish, swish. The crown was safe. When the buzzer finally sounded, the scoreboard told the story. Bulls 129, Lakers 123. From the brink of embarrassment to a statement win. Jordan had faced the future head-on, Shaq's power, Kobe's audacity, and sent them home with a lesson. The throne was not available, not yet. When the dust settled in Chicago, it wasn't just another win on the Bulls' record. It was a night that carried far more weight than the standings could ever show. For Kobe Bryant, it was his baptism by fire. He had stepped onto the court with his idol, tested himself, and walked away humbled but inspired. Years later, he would admit that this game was like a crash course, a chance to learn firsthand what greatness really looked like. The lessons he absorbed that night, Jordan's footwork, his composure, his relentless mindset, would fuel him for the rest of his career. For Shaquille O'Neal, it was a reminder that domination alone wasn't enough. He had been a force of nature, the most unstoppable player on the floor for long stretches. Yet in the end, his team lost. It showed him that even the biggest, strongest player in the league couldn't win without trust, teamwork, and execution when the pressure peaked. Lessons he'd carry into his own dynasty just a few years later. And for Michael Jordan, this was another page in the legend. At 33 years old, with challengers younger, stronger, and hungrier, he showed that greatness wasn't just about talent. It was about willpower, patience, and the ability to rise exactly when your team needed you most. He looked the future of the NBA in the eyes, Shaq's raw power, Kobe's fearless ambition, and he made them wait. The Bulls would go on to win the 1997 and 1998 championships, completing their second three-peat. The Lakers, in time, would rise and dominate the early 2000s with Kobe and Shaq at the helm. But on December 17, 1996, the throne stayed exactly where it was. That's why fans still talk about it decades later. Because it wasn't just a regular season game, it was a clash of eras, a collision of legacies, and a reminder that before the torch could ever be passed, the king had to give his blessing. And on that night, in overtime at the United Center, Michael Jordan made it crystal clear. The crown was still his,